Guys, it's beanie weather! Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori and I'm sick! So please ignore my voice through this video, but we are going to talk about the absolute roller coaster that was my September reading experience. I don't know that I had a month this entire year that was quite as much of this in the reading experience, so I'm excited to talk about it. Let's get into it. The first book that I read this month was the finale of my TBR takeover with Brian from BellTube. Please go down in the description box below and subscribe to his channel because he is one of my good friends and he is an awesome person and an awesome content creator, so you should go check him out. But in my TBR takeover, which you can watch up here, he chose 3 books for me to read in the month of August, and I did have to spill over into September a little bit because I was a little behind. But the third and final book that he chose for me was Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Kyle. This is the first book in his Bound and the Broken series, and it is not the first book in that series that I have read. I did read the novella The Fall prior to reading Of Blood and Fire, which I really enjoyed, and I've been meaning to get to book 1 for quite a while. I'm not gonna lie, the size of books 2 and 3 in this series definitely had me hesitating jumping right in. So I'm really glad that Brian kind of pushed me off the cliff, so to speak, to actually get started on this series. Of Blood and Fire is a heavily classic fantasy inspired series. Dragon Rider, Chosen One, all of the tropes that we know and love from classic fantasy series, like Wheel of Time. There's a lot of Aragon vibes in here, a little bit of Tolkien, so a lot of that kind of feel. I really enjoyed The Fall, the novella before this. This one fell really, really flat for me. And in fairness to the book, I'm not a Chosen One fan. Classic fantasy can be a bit of a hard sell for me in terms of just what I enjoy overall. But this one, I wasn't a big fan of, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't really jive with the writing style. The story felt very disjointed to me in terms of the pacing and just the dialogue, and a lot of pieces of this book just didn't quite land for me. I have heard from a lot of people that love this series that book 2 is a massive spike in just craft, and like he does a really good job kind of furthering the plot and the characters in book 2, which I may still try at some point. But overall, I had a really hard time with this one, you guys. It's definitely a story structure that I struggled with. And I had a really hard time investing in the characters, which, as you guys know from my channel in general, is a big thing for me. If I can't immerse with the characters in a story, it's going to be really hard for me to appreciate any other aspect. So with that said, I am really, really glad that I finally got to this book because it's been sitting on my shelf for ages. So thank you, Brian, for finally giving me the push to start this. It's been really interesting actually to see the very divisive opinions on the Fall novella, actually, which I enjoyed more than book 1, and I kind of wish that we had been able to just continue with that story. But this goes way into the future and deals with a completely different cast of characters, which is fine. I just personally liked The Fall better than Of Blood and Fire. Next up, we had a read-along within my private Discord, which you can check out links for down in the description box. And we read Essie by Susanna Clarke. This is my first experience with Susanna Clarke, and I gotta say, you guys, I was incredibly impressed. This book is notorious for people saying, I don't want to tell you too much about it because I don't want you to know anything going in. It's better to go in blind. And I completely agree with this. I highly recommend anybody who has not read Essie yet to not look up anything. I mean, honestly, don't even read the synopsis if you can manage it. I'm going to tell you a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit here, so if you want to skip it, go right ahead to where I'm talking about the next book. But I do want to share a couple small things that I can tell you because I know it can be frustrating sometimes when people are like, I'm not going to tell you anything, this book was just great. This book starts off with a character named Essie who is in a very unique house. The vibes of this book are so abstract and ethereal and thought-provoking. The prose, you guys, This is one of those books that, as a writer, I read this and I say, man, I wish I could write like that. Like, her prose is so stellar. It's so beautiful. There are descriptions of things. It's almost just profound in its simplicity at times, and then a few minutes later there would be moments where I had to backtrack and reread a section just because it was so beautiful and I just wanted to read it again and experience it again. So highly recommend this book. As you can see, it's super short, so actually pretty bingeable read. But with that said, I would take your time to savor this one, and I'm not going to share, just like everybody else, I'm sorry, I'm not going to share a ton about this story because I do think that experiencing it as blind as possible is the best way to read Pure and Essie. Next up, I picked up a historical romance murder mystery combination by an author that I have read multiple times, and that is A Crane Among Wolves by June Her. This is her newest novel, came out, I believe, already here in 2024. Yes. So June Her is an author that I really appreciate because she has been working on stories told within the Joseon and Goryeo dynasty eras of Korea. And that is an era of history that I am incredibly intrigued by, being a massive K-drama fan and just super interested in Korean history in general, Asian history in general. And we need more of this. We need more of this era in storytelling in the Western world because Joseon and Goryeo era Korea are just fascinating. There's so much there. The layered politics, the just incredible messy family dynamics, and the tension and suspense of every moment living as especially a royal in this era. Just mind-blowing to me. A Crane Among Wolves is a young woman who is determined to find her sister who's been kidnapped by King Yeonsun, who is famous in Korea as being kind of a mad king, and he did a lot of horrible, atrocious things. Our main character, Isul, braves getting closer to this mad king with the hope of saving her sister from his harem, and she meets up with a couple of other characters, one of which includes Prince Daehyun, who is walking his own tightrope as the king's brother, trying to survive through the king's tyranny. So this is the third book of June Her's that I have read. It is definitely my least favorite of the three. I have also read Silence of the Bones and The Red Palace by her, which I highly recommend if you're looking for some YA murder mystery historical fiction that I think is quite good and set in a really interesting historical period. I have to give June Her a ton of kudos because I hope that she is leading a cavalry charge of new storytelling set in historical Korea, because there's so much there, you guys. There's so much world history in so many places that just would be fascinating to read more of. So please check out June Her's work if that sounds interesting to you. If you like K-dramas, I highly recommend her work, especially Red Palace, which I think of the three is probably my favorite. Crane Among Wolves, the character work in this one, I'm going to admit, was not as strong as her other books. I didn't like it as much. There were some very kind of tropey things that I wasn't a big fan of. But I'm still a big fan of her work, and I'm looking forward to reading more from her in the future. The next novel I picked up was kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing, one that I've been wanting to read for quite a while. It's another indie fantasy that has a very non-traditional protagonist that I absolutely loved. Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons, and the only reason I can say that is because I've typed it out so many times at this point. This book, you guys, oh my goodness, if you enjoy Regency-era storytelling at all, please read this book. Mildred is our protagonist, and she is a middle-aged spinster who is basically the unpaid and unofficial governess for her nieces and nephew. Her sister is insufferable and makes Mildred's life kind of hellish. But Mildred is the type of person who's going to suffer in silence and just kind of, wistfully wonder what her life might have been in different circumstances. And then adventure comes knocking on her door when she inherits a chest of what looks like random assortment of things from her great uncle Forthright, who has recently passed away. And within that chest is a dragon egg. And thus Mildred's adventure begins. Mildred is a delightful protagonist, and I have to say, I have followed Quen Olsen on Twitter for a long time, and she's a friend of mine. She's incredibly clever and witty, and I love her tweets. She's so funny. She's a mom. She's a homeschooling mom, and her commentary on motherhood and life in general and just aging and everything is just so incredibly delightful that I knew a lot of that same tone was going to be found in Miss Percys, and I was not disappointed. This book is so funny. It's fresh, it's witty, it's the dragon book we didn't know we needed. If you have been interested in cozy fantasy with some good characters, that you can't, I mean, this is literally, she's the queen. She's the queen. I absolutely loved this book. 5 stars all the way. Cannot wait to continue this series. Her characterization of the dragon specifically is so delightful. I wish there had been more of him. That was one of my small critiques about the book, is I wish there had been more of the dragon. But Mildred is such a phenomenal main character, and everything about this book just makes me so happy. I actually really enjoy the romance that exists in this book, which for me is a big deal. So you know, if I'm hyping the romance, it's gotta be decent, because Quen can write a romance, I'll give her that. Last but not least on my list of novels was another book that completely took over my TBR out of nowhere that I have been being bothered to read for a long time by my friend Andrew Wizard. Also go check out his channel down below in the description, because he often comes up to me with these stories and is like, Tori, you're really gonna love this. Please read this. And I know he's right, but it takes me a while to get to them anyway, which I feel really bad about, because honestly, he's had some pretty banger recommendations for me so far. And Iron Prince is probably my favorite thing he has ever recommended to me, and is now in the running for my book of the year. I did an entire review specifically for this book, which you can watch up here, where I go into depth about why I love this book so much. It is a science fiction cyberpunk progression story about a young man named Raiden Ward who gets a combat assistance device from the military and has to rank up to even catch the tailing end of his class in battle school, and he is in a lot of danger because he's just not up to the same specs as everybody else. So you start out with this incredibly underdog character. The found family aspect of this book is so good. The characters in this book are so good, you guys. This is the kind of coming of age story that I live for. I binged this book, and I want you to just look at how chunky this is. This is 1,000 pages in the ebook version, which is what I read. The protagonist is so good. The cast of characters around him is so good. The possibilities and potential for where this story could go and how the authors could expand on the world and the wider conflict is really exciting for me. This is book 1 of currently 2 books, and I know there's going to be more after that. But that is Iron Prince by Bryce O'Connor and Luke Chmalenko. I love this book so much. I loved it so much. And please, again, go watch my gush review of it, because I kind of threw out my TBR already here in October, and I've been reading book 2, and I'm already like 400 pages into it because I can't put this story down. This is the type of character work that will grab you and will not let you go. I cannot put this book down. I love these characters, and I hope everyone tries this book if you're at all interested in science fiction, progression, cyberpunk. This is the book for you. The last thing that I'm going to touch on is my journey through Attack on Titan. I did read volumes 11, 12, and 13 in the month of September. I'm still enjoying it. I am ready for some more details, reveals, etc. I'm ready to kind of move forward in the story. I feel like at this point I am still a little confused by a few of the plot points, but I'm still invested in what's going to happen to these characters. I don't know. I'm really hoping in the next few volumes I'm grabbed by the plot and what's going on a little bit more, because I have kind of started to drag with it a little bit. I am planning on continuing the series, but I've just been taken over by so many other things on my TBR that I'm enjoying so much more at this point, that I've kind of plateaued a little bit with Attack on Titan, which is fine. But hopefully I will have better news for you guys at the end of next month when I've read more of it. That is everything that I read in the month of September. I had 2 5-star reads, 3 5-star reads. I think I give Percys and Essie 5 stars too, which is like awesome because I do not give 5 stars out like candy. And so it felt really good to have some awesome stellar reads this month. It was kind of a turnaround from some of my summer reading, and I'm just thrilled with these books, and I can't wait to continue on in the series that I've started. And I hope you guys also had an awesome month. Let me know down in the comments what your book of the month was, what you read in September, and how you felt about it. I would love to know. And also check out my description box for all of the things. Like and subscribe if you like my content. And have a great week. I will see you in the next video.